Princess Stories.
Rapunzel, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella.
Hi, this is Lisa DeSimone. I'll be reading Rapunzel by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there lived a man and a woman in a tiny cottage in the woods. Behind their house was an enchanted garden with the most beautiful flowers, plants, and vegetables. The garden was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go in because it belonged to an evil witch. The husband and wife's garden was small, and the soil was rocky. They were very poor and could barely grow enough food to eat. Each day they longed to go into the enchanted garden to gather some food to eat. One day the man could not stand it anymore and climbed over the wall and into the garden to gather some vegetables and fruits to bring back to his wife. His wife loved it, and so each day she sent her husband back into the enchanted garden to gather even more food to bring back to her. But one day, when he climbed over the wall, he became very frightened. The evil witch was standing there right in front of him. "How dare you come into my enchanted garden and steal my food?" she said angrily. The man's voice trembled. "I am sorry, but my wife and I were very hungry and saw that your garden had so much food to offer. My wife would have died if she did not have something to eat. Please, if you let me go, I promise not to take any more." The evil witch spoke in a nicer voice. "Okay, well, if you are speaking the truth, then I will allow you to take all the food your wife and you can eat, but on one condition. When you have a child, you must give her to me. I will raise her like I were her mother, and she will be very well taken care of." The man was still terrified of the evil witch, and since he knew his wife must have food to eat, he agreed to give his first child to the witch. A few years passed, and the man and his wife had a baby girl. They kept her hidden away in the cottage so that the evil witch did not see her and would not take her away. The man and woman sang their baby daughter lullabies and read her stories. They loved their girl very much. The man and woman did not know that the evil witch could see them from her castle. She watched them each day play with their daughter. Finally, one day, the evil witch came to their cottage and knocked on the door. "This little child belongs to me now," the witch said in a snarling voice. "I shall now take her to live with me in my castle, and I will name her Rapunzel." Saddened, the man and his wife let the evil witch take their daughter away as the man had promised. Years went by, and Rapunzel was well taken care of as the evil witch said she would be. She had grown up to become one of the most beautiful little girls ever seen. Rapunzel had lovely long hair that was as golden as rays of sun and a fair complexion with eyes of blue that reflected the color of the sky. Rapunzel loved to sing and remembered how her mother and father used to sing her lullabies. She would often find herself with the tower window open, singing to the birds that would fly by. But when Rapunzel turned 12 years old, the evil witch locked her up in the top of a castle tower. But this was no ordinary castle tower. This tower had no door and no way to the top, only a small window that allowed Rapunzel to see the world outside. Rapunzel was not allowed to tell anyone how to get into the tower. When the witch wanted to go inside the tower, she cried out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." Then the witch would climb up her hair and go inside the castle tower. A few more years went by, and Rapunzel continued to let her hair down to let the evil witch into the tower. But one day, When she was alone in the castle tower, a prince rode by on a beautiful white horse and heard a radiant voice coming from the tower. But when he tried to find the door to go inside to see Rapunzel, he could not find one. Feeling sad that he could not speak to her, he rode home to his castle. He thought of Rapunzel and her delightful singing voice every day and went to listen to her sing every afternoon. One day, as he was resting against a tree outside of the castle tower, he saw the evil witch ride up and yell out to Rapunzel, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." Curious, the prince kept watching and saw Rapunzel let her long flowing hair down for the witch to climb up. So, the very next day, Prince went back to the castle tower and decided to call out to Rapunzel the same way the evil witch had. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair!" he shouted. Immediately, Rapunzel let her hair fall down, and the prince climbed up her golden locks into the castle tower. At first, Rapunzel did not know what to say to the prince, as she only saw the witch each day. But once he began to talk to her and tell her how much he loved her beautiful singing voice, she became very comfortable and told him of her life in the castle tower. The prince was in love and asked Rapunzel to marry him. She liked the prince very much and knew the prince would care for her much more than the evil witch did, and so she said yes. Rapunzel and the prince decided the best way for Rapunzel to get down from the tower was for the prince to bring her a bit of silk thread every day, which she would weave into a ladder for her to climb down. But one day, as Rapunzel was weaving the ladder, the witch came and yelled, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." When the evil witch came inside Rapunzel's room, she saw the ladder and became very angry. "You have betrayed me," she said. With that, the evil witch took a pair of scissors and cut off Rapunzel's lovely golden locks of hair. The next day, when the prince came with more silk thread, the evil witch tricked him by throwing the hair out the window for him to climb up. When he got inside the castle tower, he did not see his darling Rapunzel, but instead the evil witch. "You will never see your Rapunzel again," the witch cackled. "I am taking her to a desert where you will never find her." The prince was so upset that he jumped out of the castle tower and fell onto some thorns, which made him blind. He feared the witch was telling the truth and that he had lost his darling Rapunzel forever. Now blind, he stayed in the forest eating just roots and berries. For years, he stayed away from everyone. But one day he walked and stumbled upon a beautiful lake. There, he heard a beautiful voice he recognized as the sweet singing sounds of Rapunzel. He walked towards the voice, and it was indeed Rapunzel. When she saw the prince, she recognized him instantly and fell over him weeping. 2 of her tears landed on the prince's eyes, and he could again see. The prince and Rapunzel hugged each other and went to the prince's castle. At that moment, Rapunzel and the prince knew they would live happily ever after. And they did. The end.
This is Jennifer Gray and Clark Gregg reading Beauty and the Beast.
Once upon a time, in a far-off country, a successful merchant lived in a lovely cottage in the forest with his 2 sons and 2 daughters. Whenever one of his ships came into port, he would travel to town to sell the goods that they brought back. And every time, his children would ask him to bring things back for them. "I want a great sword encrusted in jewels," said his sons.
I want a golden harp with strings made from silk,
said one of his daughters. The oldest child, however, never asked for anything.
I just want you to come home safely.
She would tell her father. She was such a pretty young woman that her family took to simply calling her Beauty. And this was a fitting name, for Beauty most liked all the beautiful things in life. The sound of birds singing, a sweet line of poetry from a good book, the smell of fresh flowers blooming. "Are you sure there is nothing I can bring you?" asked her father before he left. "The other children have asked for so much." Beauty thought about it for a second before answering.
I would love for you to bring me a rose.
She said.
We don't have them here in the forest, and I do love the way they smell.
The merchant agreed with a smile, and giving his horse a kick, he was off. But when he got to town, he found out that his ship had been damaged in a bad thunderstorm, and there were no goods to be sold. With no money for gifts, he sadly decided to return home. But soon the thunderstorm reached the land, engulfing everything in rain and wind and lightning. By the light of his lantern, the merchant saw a great castle in the distance and decided to ask for shelter. He was so tired that he didn't notice that the storm mysteriously cleared when he approached the castle. He found the front door open, and with no response to his calls, he entered. The palace was beautiful, but strangely empty. The merchant wandered into a room where a fire was burning, and a chair was drawn up close to it. Exhausted, the man quickly fell into a deep sleep. When he woke after several hours, his stomach was growling and he was still alone, but someone had already set a plate of food in front of him. It had been nearly a full day since he last ate, so he grabbed the food, promising to thank his host later. He walked down to the garden and found, to his surprise, that the sun shone and the birds sang. The merchant was delighted to see a hedge of roses lining the path toward the stables, which reminded him of his promise to Beauty. He had stopped to gather one when he was startled by a strange noise behind him. Turning around, he saw a fearsome and angry-looking beast. "Who said you could take my roses?" the beast asked in a terrible voice. "Was it not enough that I fed you? This is how you show your gratitude, by stealing my flowers?" The merchant, terrified by these furious words, dropped the rose and threw himself on his knees. "Pardon me, noble sir," he said. "I am truly grateful for your hospitality, and I didn't realize you would be offended by my taking such a little thing as a rose." But the beast's anger was not lessened by this speech. "You may be quite good with excuses and flattery," he cried, "but that will not save you from the death you deserve." In despair, the merchant began to tell the beast of all his misfortunes, the reason for his journey, and his daughter's request. "A king's ransom would hardly have paid for all that my other children asked," he said, "but I thought that I might at least take Beauty her rose. I beg you to forgive me, for I meant no harm." The beast considered this for a moment. "I will forgive you on one condition," he said, "and that is that you will give me one of your daughters." "Ah," cried the merchant, "even if I were cruel enough to save my own life at the expense of one of my children's, what would I say to make her come here?" "You mustn't force her to come," answered the beast. "See if any one of them is courageous enough to save your life. In 1 month, if none of your daughters is willing to come, you must say goodbye to them forever and return alone. If you fail to keep your promise, I will come after you myself," the beast added grimly. The merchant reluctantly accepted the offer, thinking none of his daughters would agree to come to the castle. The beast gave him a rose for Beauty and allowed him to leave. When he finally returned home, his children were upset that he didn't have any gifts for them. When he told them about the castle and the promise he made, his sons vowed to go to the castle and kill the beast. But then the children turned angrily to Beauty.
You should have asked for something more sensible than a rose.
They complained bitterly. Poor Beauty felt terrible.
Who could have guessed that a rose would cause so much misery?
She said.
But since I was the one who asked for it, I should be the one to suffer for it. I'll go back with my father to keep his promise.
At first, her father and brothers, who loved her dearly, refused to let her go, but Beauty had made up her mind, and when the day finally came, she comforted her father as they traveled there together. As they neared the castle, fireworks lit the sky before them. When they reached the avenue of orange trees, there were statues holding flame torches, and they could see the palace was illuminated from the roof to the ground, with music sounding softly from the courtyard. Beauty couldn't help admiring all the wonderful things she saw. Once inside the castle, they found a fire burning and a table set with a delicious supper for two. They had hardly finished the meal when the sound of Beast's footsteps could be heard, and Beauty clung to her father in terror. But when the Beast appeared, she greeted him respectfully. "Have you come willingly?" he asked Beauty, who told him that she had. The Beast turned to the merchant. "Then you will leave, never to return again." beast allowed the merchant to fill 2 trunks with gold and jewels, but then told him he must leave immediately. When her father was gone, Beauty began to cry. The beast seemed agitated. "Take whatever you need from the castle," he growled, and left abruptly. Beauty found her room and cried herself to sleep. She dreamt that she was walking near a stream when a young and handsome prince appeared. "You will be rewarded for all you have suffered," the prince told her. "Do not trust too much your eyes. No matter how I may be disguised, I love you dearly, and in saving me from my cruel misery, you will find your own happiness." She awoke feeling better, and she set off to explore the palace. She wandered through rooms lined with mirrors and others filled with books and musical instruments. In one of them, she was surprised to find a bracelet with a picture of the prince that had been in her dreams, and she slipped it onto her arm with a smile and imagined he would come rescue her. A moment later, the beast greeted her at the doorway. He frightened her so much that she could barely look at him, and she didn't even notice the fine suit he wore. He asked her what she thought of the palace, and as they talked, she began to think he wasn't nearly as terrible as he seemed. But when he got up to leave, the beast asked gruffly, "Do you love me, Beauty?" Without thinking, she said,
"No, you're a beast."
and then looked down at her new bracelet. "Good night, then, Beauty," the beast replied, as he ran off abruptly. She was relieved that he didn't attack her. After that, the days took on a similar pattern. There were plenty of wonderful rooms and gardens in the palace to entertain her, but every evening after supper, the beast came to see her, and always, before saying goodnight, he asked in his terrible voice, "Beauty, do you love me?" Beauty, thinking of the prince of her dreams, always answered politely,
"No, beast."
But the longer Beauty stayed at the castle, the less she was afraid of the beast. She began to notice that he was actually very polite when he came to see her, and even seemed to be a little nervous. After a while, it occurred to Beauty that the beast seemed more scared of her than she was of him. She also found that she began to enjoy spending time with the beast. Beneath his fearsome looks, he was actually very thoughtful and caring, and she felt sad because each night when she refused to marry him, he went away so sorrowfully. But at night, her dreams of the handsome prince soon made her forget about the poor beast. She concentrated all of her thoughts on what the prince had told her. "Distrust all appearances. Let your heart guide you instead of your eyes." Beauty found that she was quite content at the castle with the beast, but she also missed her family dearly and wondered how she would ever find her prince. One night, seeing her looking very sad, the beast asked what was the matter. She told him she wished to see her home once more. Though the beast seemed sadly distressed, to her surprise, he said she could go home. "It makes me sad to see you go," said the beast in as soft a voice as she had ever heard from him, "but I want you to be happy." He handed her a beautiful ring and said, "If ever you choose to return, just put this ring on your finger and you will be back at my castle." And with that, he left her alone. When Beauty arrived back home, her family was overjoyed to see her. When she told her father about her dream of the prince, the part about not trusting appearances made him stop and think about the beast, and how he was so kind to them despite his appearance. But he was too overjoyed to have his daughter back, and the family went to celebrate. But although Beauty was glad to be back with her family, she also missed the castle and its beautiful rooms, and even her talks with the beast. And she soon noticed that she did not dream of the prince anymore. Instead, after a few weeks, she began to have a different dream. In it, she was wandering through the palace gardens when she heard groans of pain from a nearby cave. She ran over to find the beast stretched out upon his side, looking weak and frail. After having this dream for several nights, she became very worried about the beast. She decided she should go back to the castle to check on him. Despite protests from her family, she put the beast's ring onto her finger, and she was magically transported back to the palace. She called out for the beast, but he didn't come to her. Finally, she remembered the cave from her dream and ran out to the gardens. Looking around, she saw a familiar path and walked down it, coming to the very same cave she dreamed about. She ran inside and found the beast lying motionless.
"Oh, he's dead.
She cried bitterly.
I should never have left him alone here."
She wept and put her hands over her face, but then she heard the sound of the beast moving. "Beauty," he said weakly.
"Oh, how you frightened me.
She cried.
I never knew how much I loved you until we were apart."
"Can you really love such an ugly creature?" the beast asked faintly.
"Yes, beast. I love you more than anything else in this world."
The beast, suddenly sounding stronger and stronger, began to tell her a story in a gentle voice. When I was younger, a witch came to my castle. Seeing the warts on her face and her ugly green skin, I refused to let her in. So she put a curse on my entire palace. Because I had judged her by her appearance, she turned me into a terrible-looking beast, and she said I would die unless I could earn the true love of a good woman. Beauty suddenly realized that she had heard this voice before. The beast stood up and he began to sparkle with light, until the light became so bright that Beauty had to close her eyes. When she opened them, she saw that the handsome prince from her dreams stood where the beast was. Hand in hand, the two left the cave and found that the castle had come to life with lights and music, and in the sky, in letters all made of fireflies, was written, "Long live the prince and his bride."
Hi, this is Lisa DeSimone. I'll be reading Cinderella. Once upon a time, there lived a gentleman who, after his beautiful and kind wife died, married the proudest and meanest woman in all the land. She had 2 daughters from a previous marriage who were just as nasty and haughty as their mother. The gentleman also had a young daughter by another wife named Cinderella, who was filled with goodness and was one of the sweetest girls the kingdom had ever seen. Cinderella's stepmother was extremely jealous of her beauty and charm and made her do the hardest and most dreadful work in the house. Cinderella did the dishes, scrubbed the floor, and made the beds, all while her stepsisters rested on fancy beds and had fun playing dress-up. Now it so happened that the king's son decided to give a ball, inviting all the young ladies in the land to attend. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters were delighted and would talk of nothing but the ball all day long. They sent for the greatest designers in the kingdom to ensure that they looked their best. Cinderella offered to help them get ready for the ball, for she had excellent taste, and despite how her stepsisters treated her, she always gave them the best advice. As she helped them, the eldest sister asked, "Cinderella, are you not going to the ball?" Cinderella sadly lowered her head and said, "No, you're only teasing me because I have nothing to wear and wouldn't fit in. Perhaps I could borrow something." "Lend our clothes to such a dirty cinder wench? We're not fools," they exclaimed. The sisters laughed cruelly and said, "You would make everyone laugh at the sight of you, you cinder wrench." When the big day finally came, Cinderella accompanied her stepmother and stepsisters to the court and couldn't help but burst into tears as she watched them enter the beautiful ball. As she wept, Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared. "Cinderella, why are you crying?" she asked. "You wish to attend the ball? Is that not so?" "Yes," cried Cinderella between sobs. The fairy godmother smiled and said, "Well, run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella immediately went to get the finest pumpkin she could find. When she brought it, her godmother struck the pumpkin with her wand, instantly turning it into a fine coach, plated with gold and silver. Next, she had Cinderella find some mice, and when she brought the furry little creatures back, the fairy godmother tapped them each with her wand, turning them into 6 fine horses and a coachman. "Well, what do you say?" asked her godmother. "Oh, yes!" cried Cinderella. "But should I go looking like this, in these rags?" Her godmother only touched her with her wand, and instantly Cinderella's rags turned into a dress of white and silver, sparkling with jewels. To top it off, fairy godmother gave Cinderella a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the whole world. The spell only lasts until midnight, so promise you will leave the ball before then, warned the godmother. Cinderella promised to return before midnight, thanked her again, and drove off to the ball. When Cinderella made her entrance, the dancing and music stopped as everyone turned to gaze at her beauty. No one recognized her. She was a complete mystery. The prince rushed up to greet her, led her to the most honorable seat by his side, and later took her out for a dance. Cinderella even made time to approach her stepsisters, who still did not recognize her, and shared some of the oranges the prince had presented to her as a gift. The prince never left her side, and Cinderella was enjoying herself so much that she completely forgot the time. When the clock struck midnight, Cinderella was shocked and fled immediately, leaving one of her glass slippers behind in her haste. The prince ran to follow her, but only managed to pick up the glass slipper she left behind. Cinderella managed to get home, but she was quite out of breath and in her dirty old clothes. She was resting in bed when her two stepsisters stumbled into her room. "You stayed really late," cried Cinderella, rubbing her eyes and stretching as if she had been sleeping. "If you had been there, you would have seen the most beautiful princess," exclaimed the eldest sister. "She was so nice to us and had the undivided attention of the prince. Her background is a mystery, and the prince would give anything to know who she was," said the youngest. A few days later, the prince declared that he would marry the woman whose foot fit in the slipper. His soldiers began to try the slipper on all the princesses and duchesses in the court, but it was all in vain. Days later, it was brought to the two sisters, who tried with all their might to make the slipper fit. Cinderella, who saw this, politely asked to try it. Her sisters burst out laughing at the idea, but the prince ordered that everyone in the kingdom should have a try. When Cinderella's foot slid perfectly into the slipper, her sisters were astonished. Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared, and with the flick of her wand, turned Cinderella into the beautiful girl from the ball. The stepsisters dropped to their knees and begged for forgiveness for the awful way they treated her over the years. Cinderella lifted them up and embraced them, saying she forgave them with all her heart. Cinderella was then escorted to the prince, dressed as beautiful as she was at the ball. A few days later, they were married. Cinderella, who was no less good than beautiful, gave her two sisters rooms in the palace, and everyone lived happily ever after. The end.